Good evening, listeners. I'm Amy Shannon, and this is The Living Past Echoes and Whispers. Every person has a story, and behind every story, there is a person. And together, we will explore the past of humanities, communities, and culture. And I originally was going to start this podcast and have it be local New York history, and a lot of it will be, and a lot of it will be local to my area because that's kind of my expertise and where I have focused my first two books. And I also write articles for the local Saratoga County Historical Society Roundtable. I've published a few articles with them. I have an article coming out, and hopefully it'll be out by time this airs. That I wrote for the Daily Gazette, located in Schenectady, for a magazine they're doing to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of the Independence. I know there are currently I'm recording this on July 4th, but I like to do my recordings ahead of time. And so by the time you see this, a lot of the celebrations will have toned down, but I don't see that having to be is necessary to do that. A little background on me. I am made up of coffee, uh, flavored water, especially lemon, and wine, which those are my beverages of choice. And I also have been, I've been telling stories since I could talk. Um, and I've been writing since I could write. And I mean, as soon as I learned the alphabet using the letter people, if you remember that from the early 70s, but I also learned the alphabet and how to write from my mother. And she also taught me how to tie my shoes. So I was all set before kindergarten. Um, as I grew up, I always wrote short stories and poetry in, excuse me, and I loved it when in English class we had to write our own stories. I was the girl that read the dictionary. Um, and sometimes the English teachers thought I was using big words to impress them, but then they realized that was just how I wrote. I wanted to always improve my vocabulary and my writing skills. I must admit, during my teenage years, there was a lot of that teenage darkness and angst, and that you can expect. But as I got older, I wrote, better poetry. Um, wrote a song once or twice. I don't know. I don't think it can be a song. Um, and then I lived. I had I've had like two uh, disastrous marriages, but four lovely sons. Three of them actually like me, and I am very proud of each and every one of them. Um, I raised my three sons by myself, and I did my best to do that. Um, it wasn't always easy to do writing, but when they were in school and the house was clean, that was kind of what I did. Um, so in the past few years, I've I started getting really interested in family history. I've always loved listening to stories from my grandmother, my mom, my dad when he said it, and opened up a little bit of new stories that I didn't know before. There's a bunch of stories that now I have questions about, and I have to find if people can answer them. Um, as I said, today is July 4th at this recording, and it has been 4 years to the date that I lost my grandmother. She was 101, and the only reason she passed away at the time was not because she was 101, but because she had fallen. And she was my best friend, literally. I mean, some people say, "Oh yeah, my best friend," it was my mom and my grandmother. She actually was. We talked at least once a week. Um, she always had me as her backup to look out for my dad, and I did look out for my dad and took care of him. And um, he lost his four year battle with dementia, because he had it was induced by a TBI he got when he was a child. But he fought very hard. His body fought even when his mind wasn't there. But the one thing it could never take away from him was his smile. And you may, if you've watched the pilot episode, that I dedicated a lot of the story to my dad. He loved history as much as I do. He loved reading biographies. We swapped books and things like that and shared information. So that is just something I carry with me. Um, so, excuse me. I One thing I don't edit. I edit for dead air, and if sometimes there is some instability with my connection, but I am hardwired, so I don't see a lot of that unless the power goes out. Um, so if I stumble on my words, because I do that a lot, I myself have a TBI from a domestic violence incident. Anyways, getting past that, it festered into a neurological disorder, and I have to deal with that. So back to my love for history. You know, after my grandmother died, I remembered that my dad's cousin, cousin Bill, that's who I call him. That's what I call him. He is also a lifelong historian, and he actually was an official historian for Schenectady County, and I think in some ways he still is. And he still, even though he's supposed to be retired, he still writes articles for the Daily Gazette in Schenectady, New York. Um, and I had my grandmother had told me that he once interviewed her, so I contacted him and asked him if I could get a copy of the interview, and he was so gracious enough. And then we realized that we had a lot in common. My passion for history matches his, and that we've just connected through that, family stories, local history. Um, I wrote my first local history book called Ballstown, a community of history, friends, neighbors, and lingering spirits. That was released in 2024 in March. Um, and I have done an update to that particular book. I had noticed that there was some transposed years in it after it published, and sometimes those are hard to pick up when you're editing. Um, anyway, and that really sparked something in me. I really love the research that it takes to learn all that stuff. So I saw that there was a call for local historians to write articles for the Saratoga County Roundtable. And I have this, I was very, I don't know, attracted or inspired about someone I had done research about, Lucretia Booth and her family. And she was a very formidable woman, and she had to have her husband do things for her so she could do the things that she wanted to do, like educate women, um, in academics that were comparable to what their male counterparts were getting. So they didn't have to learn how to be a teacher, a secretary, a mother, have sewing, walking with perfect etiquette, but they also could learn things like um, math and science and history and other things that were so important, subjects that you think you don't need to know, but when you are prohibited from learning stuff, that is where that is something that bothers me. I believe that everybody has a voice. In the United States, we have freedom of speech. Yes, there are limitations, but only the limitations are those that it can put people in imminent danger if you speak or say certain things. Um, some things are against the law to say out loud, especially in certain situations. It's not a free for all for saying whatever you want. Um, but you should be able to, I believe that everybody should be able to tell their story. Um, and there are ways to tell stories without having to yell and scream or just repeat rhetoric. And that's another thing I want to stay up front is that one thing I do not share with people is I do not talk about uh, my opinion of politics or religion. And not just because they are hot topics. I've interviewed authors who, in my other podcast, that have, they are very religious. They write religious books, sometimes fiction, sometimes nonfiction, or they write their opinions about government or whatever. And am I support their right to do that, and I support them to come on one of my podcasts and talk about that. Um, and I listen and I share stories, but I never bring up my opinions on those specific, those really details of that because I've learned over the last, oh, probably 10 years that when people disagree on certain subjects, instead of having an intellectual debate, um, I've seen families and friendships break up because of someone's opinion. And I would never want something like that to happen to me. So um, I've read that recently. I read an article that a celebrity was called a coward because he refused to um, talk about his political views. And I think that's not being a coward. That is just kind of wanting to keep something personal to yourself, not wanting to spark debates and bring things out into the open where people judge you because of what you believe in. We have enough problems having people judge you because of what you look like, what you sound like, um, if your gender or your sexual orientation, um, or even being disabled. Some disabilities you can see, and others you can't. I am a disabled adult, and when I go out, I use a wheelchair, and sometimes more than I'd like to count, that I've almost been hit by cars because they were trying to beat me across the street. I've also endured people in when I've gone grocery shopping by myself, um, and I'm supposed to be, or people think that I'm in their way. And then of course, there are nice people who try to help you. And I've had people do that. And unfortunately, I am surprised more when I am treated with respect and kindness than when I am not treated with respect and kindness. Anyways, so moving forward on that, and I just wanted to bring that up because that is something that you'll learn moving forward. Also, I very rarely use vulgar language, and I will do my best not to do it on the show. Um, and any guest will be I won't censor them, but I would ask them not to use that particular language on my show. It's clean, and I'm not a prude. Yes, I swear when I'm mad, and but I've learned a long time ago that there is a way certain people talk that uh, the language that comes out of their mouth, and not that it shocks me because not much shocks me anymore, but that it sometimes it the words are uh, you hear the words more than you hear what they're actually trying to say. I knew a person who used to speak and use the F word, and every other word was the F word. So you had no idea what she was actually trying to say. Um, but anyways, say what you want. I don't care if swearing doesn't bother me. I've learned words that I wish I didn't know what they meant after I asked. And I remember being a kid and having to, my mother heard a word, she said it, and then I'm like, Mom, you can't say that word. Anyways, moving forward, um, my I am the oldest of five children. Um, I try to maintain relationships with my siblings. My mother passed away when she was 44 in 1997. My father passed away on April 1st, 2026. And my my grandma, my mom's mom, she died in 2009 in August. And um, my my grandmother, my gram, she died on July 4th, 2022. And those are the people that were most important in my life and shaped who I am. I didn't always have a great relationship with my father, but I am so glad that as adults we reconnected and we had a great relationship. And then I was able to take care of him and make all the hard decisions when he was unable to do it himself. So that is me moving forward. And that's part of my past. But I carry that with me. Um, Sometimes it's sad, grief comes in waves, and other times I am just so proud to have them um, in my life for as long as I did. When I talk about history or the books that I wrote, I can imagine me sitting down with my dad, going through them and having him share more information. He would have been an excellent resource. Um, he started losing the ability to read when I published my first book, Ballstown, and but I did had sent him a copy of that, so maybe he at least was able to read a little bit. I don't know. Um, by the time I had seen him to ask, he wasn't speaking very much. Um, my I recently published my book called Reminiscence of Ballstown, Echoes and Whispers of Forgotten Legacies. And that's something where you'll notice that in the title of my book, and the title of this podcast, Echoes and Whispers. And that is because it's not like I'm telling ghost stories, but there are a lot of people who lived their lives every day. To them it was their everyday life, and they didn't have a voice. And this especially is for women, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, aunts, um, maidens, that could only their life was not something that shared, and they quietly, most of the time, did their work. They would work themselves to the bone. And the second book, The Reminiscences, is I am it's focusing on women and their families, and of course it brings about their husbands and their children. But I've also wanted to, one thing I learned a lot about families, especially in the late 1700s, early 1800s, a lot of people lost children and they would have more. Um, these were the family, large families. Um, and, the older child would help their mother take care of the younger children. And a lot of times, a mother was grieving for the loss of a child, and then she had to continue on and take care of her family. Maybe she grieved in her own way. A lot of times, the mother would be cooking and she'd be stirring a pot in one hand and having her baby on the hip of holding the other hand, or and other little children tugging at her dress, so getting their attention. Um, Women, I learned, they worked a lot harder than, and sometimes more than, the man. Um, I like to watch these videos on YouTube where it's history of food, and it's not just about what people eat or frugality, but it's about how uh, these women were able to feed their families on little to nothing. And um, and that's something that, they would say, oh, your grandmother did this, or your mother did this, and your grandmother did this. um, and that shows what they could do. And then they talk about, oh, in the 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, women started working outside the home and had to come home and do all this. And, they were dead tired. But then I remember, I was, I'm the oldest of five. So I helped my mom. My mom not only raised my me and my brother and sisters, but she also took care of other people's children. And she also, we were like what I refer to as the Kool-Aid house, because I was the only person of my friends that, and even my siblings' friends, that they had a mother who was able to stay home and work, you know, chores and cooking and cleaning and taking some time to herself while tending to children and making sure we were all fed and dressed and cleaned and all that stuff. Make sure we cleaned our rooms, and while also being silly and telling jokes and being funny, um, and also having to live with a husband who was out of work a lot of times, and um, he was having to deal with his own issues because he didn't know what was wrong with him, and sometimes that can be frustrating. So I was planning on talking about the American Revolution at this point, but I really think that we all have a past. We have a family's past. We have a personal past, and we are, um, sometimes it doesn't have to define who we are. It can shape how we think, how we deal with situations, and who we were 10 years ago does not mean we're the same person today. I know I am extremely different. Um, and some of it is because of my disability, and others is because I've learned as you got older to, you know, not hold grudges. And, but also there's something I'm learning, and it's very hard, is to, I always do my best to try not to be in other people's way, or I try to help people to do things that I really can't do anymore. Um, but the things that I can do to help people, even if it's give advice, read their books, talk to them, um, teach people through my work, through my writing, which I'm going to be doing till I can no longer do it. Um, and I will continue to do so. So I hope that you come back to learn more about some history that I will start sharing with you. It's going to, at this point, I'm just doing the first and third Sundays or Saturdays, excuse me, of the month, and see where this takes me. So I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through humanity's histories, mysteries, and voices. Every story brings us closer to understanding where we came from, where we live, and the people who shape their communities, families, and our future. Until next time, keep listening for the echoes and whisper. Be safe, be well, and always be kind. Thank you.